Hello everyone, today I'm going to be sewing the Megan Nielsen Dove Blouse using the geometric print cotton from October's classic Hocus Pocus themed SewHayleyJane box. Welcome back to my channel. It's a bit of a grey and rainy day, but I'm bringing some sunshine with some sewing today. It's the perfect day for sewing. I've got my cup of tea in my pumpkin mug because it is coming up to Halloween. And if you saw the unboxing video from last week, you will know that we sent out Hocus Pocus themed boxes. So today I am going to be sewing the Megan Nielsen Dove Blouse using the purple cotton geometric print that went into the classic boxes. So we got 2.5 meters in the classic box. And actually this didn't use that much fabric. I probably used 1.5 meters to 2 meters, so there's some left over as well. And because it's October and because the boxes had a nod to Halloween without being novelty, I wanted to do the same thing with my make this month. And I had a little look through and I found the Dove blouse from Megan Nielsen, which has these awesome like bell or bit sort of floaty sleeves going on, which kind of gave it a slight witchy vibe, but it's still totally wearable. So I made a toile yesterday and I'm all ready to sew up the real thing. So let's get cracking. So the first thing to do, as with most tops and blouses, is to stay stitch the neckline on the front and the back. So this blouse has quite a dramatic V-neck. So that needs stay stitching. And then we've got French darts. Now I've never done French darts before, so this was really interesting. In most patterns, the dart remains a whole piece of fabric that you fold and stitch, but with a French dart, you have to cut out the dart and then you sew them together and press them down and you finish the raw edge as well. So that's going to be a bit tricky because there's not a lot of fabric to finish with an overlocker, so I might do a zigzag stitch there instead. But yes, stay stitching and darts are the first order of the day. So as you can see, the French dart has the fabric cut out. So to sew a French dart together, I've done a little tailor's tack just here, which is going to show the point of the dart tip. You just bring the raw edges together and put a pin, and you can see it already comes together really nicely. So you can put a couple of pins in. And then you sew 1/4 of an inch from the side seam, tapering to nothing at the dart tip as well. And then we're just going to zigzag to finish that off because there's not much fabric there to overlock and I'm too terrified of using the overlocker and trimming too much off. So I'm going to do a zigzag finish on that one. Okay, so the French darts are beautifully pressed down now towards the hem, and we have some nice simple seams to sew up. So the front is made of 2 halves and has a seam down the middle. So I'm going to start by sewing along the front center seam. Then I'm going to sew the shoulder seams and then I'm going to sew the side seams. So those are 3 different jobs that I'm going to do all in one go because to batch sew that bit before heading over to the iron just to save a little bit of time. So I have the other half of my front piece and I'll pop that on top. As you can see, I used the selvage as well to make full use of the fabric, but that is in the seam allowance, so that doesn't hugely matter. So put some pins in and then I'm going to sew. Now when I made my toile yesterday, I cut a size 18 at the shoulders and bust and graded down to a 22 at the hips, but I had a lot of fabric pooling in the small of my back, which would be a sway back adjustment, but I had a look, I did some research. I don't like doing sway back adjustments. I find they look a bit weird and they just don't quite work. But when I did some research, I found out that it's not so much that my back is too small, it's that my bum is too big and there's not enough room in the shirt for my bum because it's got quite a long hem as well at the back. So what I'm going to do, I've graded down to a 24 at the hips, and then I didn't want to do a sway back adjustment. There is still going to be some extra fabric, but I want a bit of shaping. So I'm going to learn from my Hayley shirt that I made by Experimental Space a couple of months ago. And I'm going to add a couple of double-ended darts into the back of the bodice to give it that shape and take away that fabric. Fingers crossed that works. Okay, so the side seams and the shoulder seams are all sewn, overlocked and pressed, and now it's time to move on to the facing. So I have attached the back neckline facing to the front at the shoulder seams. First thing we need to do is finish the raw edges of the neckline facing, which I'm just going to do on the overlocker, and then we will attach it to the neckline of the garment. I did do this bit when I made the toile yesterday, and it went really nice and easy. So famous last words, hopefully it will go nice and easy again this time. Right, overlocking the raw edges first. If you find that some of your overlocking starts to pull a little bit as you're sewing, especially if you're going around a curve, once you finish, just give it a press and it will flatten and even that out really nicely for you. And that's perfect. So I'm just going to go give this a press and then we will attach it to the neckline of the garment. Okay, so I have pinned the facing onto the neckline. I've matched up the shoulder seams of the facing with the shoulder seams of the actual garment. The other thing I've done as per the instructions is I've just marked 1/4 of an inch down into the V of the facing so that as I'm sewing I'll be able to see where to stop and pivot. So going to attach that, then we're going to understitch and iron it flat and top stitch. These are all the things that we're doing now. So with the neckline facing, it's important to remember that we are sewing with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, not the 5/8 of an inch as we are with the rest of the garment. So 1/4 of an inch is about 1/2 centimetre as well. So that's the seam allowance we're using for the neckline facing. Okay, so the facing has been sewn on and I've pressed the facing and the seam allowances away from the neckline. So we've got this like flappy bit going on here. The next stage is to understitch. So that means sewing the seam allowance to the facing, and that helps to keep the facing rolled inside of the neckline and stops it from peeping out. So to do this, I'm going to use an edge stitch foot, which is this one here. It's got this little guide here that you sew and you put the the seam line along there. But to do that, it does mean I have to put the majority of the fabric inside onto the right of the sewing machine. So it gets a little bit fiddly and a little bit bulky, but I'm going to take it really slow. And it just gives me a really nice straight seam line along parallel to the original seam line. It does make sense once you give it a go. So I'm going to attach the different foot to my sewing machine first. The facing is now beautifully sewn and turned to the inside. In Megan Nielsen's instructions, she says you can either leave it as it is or you can top stitch on the outside of the garment along to top stitch the facing down. Now, I have lost many a garment by not top stitching the facing down. I quite often find that no matter how much understitching and pressing I've done, a facing will still roll out for me. I don't know why, but it does. So top stitching is something I always do now when I sew a garment with a neckline facing. So I have put the regular sewing machine foot back into the sewing machine and put all the numbers back to where they're supposed to be. And I'm just going to top stitch about 2 centimeters in from the neckline edge. We are onto the sleeves now. So I am sewing the flared sleeve version. So I have the sleeve head bit here and then I have the flared bit here. The process is the same if you're sewing the big, super big bell sleeves. First of all, you need to stay stitch along the edge that will be attached to the sleeve. Because it is a curve, we've stay stitched and then I've just clipped into the seam allowance, and that will help it to go straight and not stretch out too much. So first thing is I've made sure to keep the notches. There's a little notch there in the center. So I'm going to start by pinning at the notch, and then I'm going to pin at the side like this, and then I can put some pins randomly in between, and you can start to see that it just opens up that edge a little bit and helps it to go nice and flat. So I've sewn the sleeve flouncy bit onto the sleeve head. I'm going to finish it with the overlocker, and then it's onto your standard sleeve insertion construction. So I'm going to do some gathering stitches along the sleeve head, sew the side seams together, and then insert the sleeve into the armhole as per your regular instructions. So we are on day 2 of sewing. I had to leave this last night because the flare of the sleeve is cut on the bias. I needed to leave the sleeves hanging for 24, supposed to be 24 hours. It's not quite been 24 hours. So that if there's any like stretching or warping that happens before you hem the sleeve. So both the sleeves are all constructed. I've already hemmed this one and now I'm going to do this one. Because it's a big curve, we want quite a nice narrow hem. And the way that the instructions tell you to do this is to first of all sew a line of stitching 1/4 of an inch in from the raw edge. Then you use that line as a guide to fold the raw edge into the sleeve. Sew 1/8 of an inch to close that down, and then fold it again and sew another 1/8 of an inch. So we're going to start off by doing just a line of stitching 1/4 of an inch in from the raw edge. So the first part of the sleeve hem is done. I have sewn the line of stitching and then folded that in and sewn another line of stitching. The next thing I need to do is really carefully just trim this raw edge away, and then I'll fold it in again. So it's going to be quite a narrow hem. So I'm going to take my scissors and just very carefully, it's easier if you sort of pick it up, trim as close to the line of stitching as possible. Onto the hem of the blouse now. This blouse has quite a dramatic curve from the side seams down to the back of the hem. So it is going to be finished with a facing instead of a hem. So I've pinned the facing to the hem of the blouse, and I'm going to sew with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, turn that up, understitch it, finish the raw edges, and then top stitch it down. And we are all done. So some more understitching and top stitching going on with this blouse, which I really like. I like the way top stitching looks, so I'm excited. Nearly finished. Last little bit. Da 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 da! She's finished, and I am really, really happy. I obviously I'm loving these sleeves. Will have to take them off when it comes time to cook or do bath time or anything like that, but they are fabulous. And I love all the sort of the details. I love the neckline facing and the hem facing. I did add a couple of closed end, double end darts on the back just to give a real gentle bit of shaping and just take out a little bit of that fullness. It's not completely like to my back, but I didn't really want it to be anyway, but it's just added just a little bit of shaping and I really love it. I think if I'm going to sew this again, which I think I probably will, I'm tempted to make it out of the luxury fabric as well for a totally different look. But I do think I would need to do a full bust adjustment because there's just a little bit, when I move my arms back and forward, a little bit of dragging going on here and here. So I think that just needs a little FBA, because I feel like it fits quite well here, but yeah, it's just a little bit tight across the back and the bust, so I think just an FBA should be enough. But yeah, I'm really happy. I love the shape of the hem as well, and that it was finished with the facing I think is a really nice look. Now, it is currently blowing a hoolie outside. It is tipping it down with rain. I have to go and pick Mia up from school in 20 minutes. But we are hopefully going to go to a pumpkin festival in Southampton tomorrow. So hopefully we can get some footage of this lovely top in situ around pumpkins and things. I think that would be really cool. But just in case we don't, I'll do a couple of videos and shots indoors as well in a minute. So you'll get one or the other. Fingers crossed it's pumpkins and I don't get too embarrassed filming in front of lots of people. I've never really done anything like that before. But there's a first time for everything. So yes, I really recommend this pattern. It was a joy to sew up as well. And I feel really good in it. So thank you so much everyone for watching. There is just a few days left to sign up in time to get your first box in November. The November boxes are looking really gorgeous. I'm currently waiting on the delivery of the classic and mini box fabric, which is just going to be beautiful. So I cannot wait to get those out. But yeah, you've got a few days left to sign up, so I'll pop the links below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a little thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you don't already, and I will love you forever. Thanks so much for watching everyone, and I'll see you all really soon. Bye.